The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to another new edition of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation, the wrestling podcast that brings logic, reasoning, perspective, and of course, intelligence into the discussion. No fanboy speak allowed. I'm your host, as always, Billy Donnelly, who you can find at thisisinfamous.com. Lots to talk about as we come away from the first SmackDown-only pay-per-view of Backlash, which, of course, you can hear a pretty thorough breakdown on a bonus edition of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation from earlier this week. So make sure you track that down wherever it is that you get your podcast from, however it is you got this podcast. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, Blueberry, wherever. It's out there for you to listen to. And there you can get all my thoughts on Backlash from top to bottom, beginning to end. This particular episode, though, lots of other things to discuss. I want to talk about CM Punk and UFC 203. I'm going to talk about the latest developments in the Paige saga in the WWE. I want to talk some TNA today, especially with Delete or Decay showing up on Impact Wrestling last week. And then, of course, we'll also talk Raw and the fallout from Backlash on SmackDown Live. One other thing that did happen in time for this podcast is the conclusion of the Cruiserweight Classic. Now, unfortunately, we're going to have to wait to discuss that because I've been behind. This is what happens with so much wrestling programming in a short amount of time, particularly weekly. I mean, let's face it. You have 5 hours between Raw and SmackDown. You watch the Hulu editions, you can cut it down a little bit. You can get by with only like 3, I think. Because basically Raw will only give you the highlights. And considering I had some things going on this week, I actually did watch Raw via Hulu this week. And I think I actually came away digging the broadcast more than if I would have sat and watched 3 hours. I know people who sat and watched the entire 3 hours on Monday, and when I talked about it with them, they were really down on the show. And Tuesday morning, when I pulled it up on my Hulu account to give this a whirl, I didn't think Raw was all that bad. Basically, you get the highlights, the high points, and they take away most of the garbage. So the 3 hours gets condensed down to an hour and a half. But either way, lots of wrestling programming on a weekly basis. This week we also had Backlash. Let's not forget, not too long ago we were at SummerSlam. So you're dealing with weeks where you may have 8 hours before you even get to Wednesday. It's just a lot of wrestling. And, I love wrestling. Believe me, this podcast exists because of my love and my passion for professional wrestling. But in order for me to be a well-rounded individual, in order for me to be able to give you some perspective on wrestling or on anything in this life, I got to be exposed to things that are not wrestling. And I think that's one of the problems that sometimes people within these companies have is that they just eat, sleep, breathe, live wrestling. And there's no exposure to what's going on outside of that world. They're in a bubble. So particularly when you're dealing with creative, when you're dealing with writers who are just nonstop in the face of wrestling, they have no real grasp of what's going on outside, no real finger on the pulse of pop culture or the world anymore because they're just in the wrestling zone. So typically what I find is when you have shows on the WWE Network, like NXT or the Cruiserweight Classic, I'm usually behind on them for a few weeks. And then what happens is I get together on a night where I'm not really doing anything, just sort of relax and vegging out on my couch. And then I'll binge through like 2 or 3 hours, like late on a Saturday night or something if I'm just hanging out at home. So, Cruiserweight Classic going to be off the table here. Did get spoiled for me a little bit. Being that behind it's just hard to avoid on social media. So, and look, I don't mind it. I think it's a surprising end. Not that surprising when you consider sort of the names that have been announced contractually is now part of the WWE, and those who are not going to be part of the WWE machine. So in that respect, I'm not that surprised. I also don't feel like it's been ruined for me. I think some shocks have been taken away from the equation. But I'm interested to see how we get here. I'm interested in the journey rather than the destination and the matches. So once I get fully caught up, we'll talk Cruiserweight Classic on a show to be determined in greater detail and to greater length. In the meantime, I'll stick to what I know right now, which is the things that I've seen. So Raw, SmackDown, the leader Decay this week. We're definitely and we'll talk about the Paige situation. But I want to kick things off talking about CM Punk at UFC 203. There has been, leading up to this fight, a great deal of haterade being drunk by disgruntled fanboy wrestling fans. The other IWC, who has some sort of axe to grind with CM Punk. Now, I've talked about this in the past, and I'm going to do it as briefly as I can right here, just to try and get it through some people's thick skulls who just want to walk around angry all the time about something that really has no bearing on their life and nothing to do with them. CM Punk walked away from the WWE because he just didn't like it anymore. No different than if you had a job, didn't like it anymore, were fed up with it, and ultimately decided, you know what? I'm just going to quit. And I'll see what else is out there, and I'll get another job. Or for those of you who just look for another job while you're in the job and go, I gotta get out of here. I need to go somewhere else. That's what CM Punk did. CM Punk, in the WWE, lost his passion for a thing that he had passion for forever. Lost his love for something that he had love for forever. Was sort of just meandering through it because it's something that he was good at, something that he'd been doing forever, something that he knew quite well. But ultimately, he wasn't satisfied anymore. He wasn't fulfilled anymore by what he was doing, just sort of going through the motions. And I think it takes a lot of balls to see that, to acknowledge that, and to try and make a change. And I think where a lot of the hate comes from leaving the WWE and the UFC, I think it comes from a couple different places. Number one, it comes from this. It comes from a guy having the guts to rock the boat, to shake things up in his life with no certainty of whether or not it's going to work out. And rolling the dice to try and find happiness somewhere else. Guy decided, I need a change, and made the change. And I think where a lot of this anger stems from is sort of a jealousy that somebody else did that and you feel like you can't. Now, look, I can't tell you what to do. Everybody's situation is different. You know, you got responsibilities, you got bills to pay, you got family to feed. I get it. It's tough to just say, fuck it, I'm going to go do something else. And roll the dice and hope it works out. It's tough to do that. Because you're going into the unknown. The unknown is scary. It's frightening. And CM Punk did it. For himself. For himself. Has nothing to do with me or you or anybody else. Which I think a lot of wrestling fanboys get confused. There's nothing to do with you. CM Punk acted on behalf of CM Punk. And how can you knock that? I mean, people are going to knock it anyway, but it's a jealousy for not finding it within yourself to be able to walk away from the unhappiness that exists in your own life to try and pursue something else that might do it for you. So that exists. The other side of the equation, I think, is just people who feel like CM Punk owed them something. They were a fan of CM Punk. They bought CM Punk shirts. They watched CM Punk on TV. They bought tickets to see CM Punk. And as a result, and I've talked about this before, they feel some sort of ownership over CM Punk. How dare CM Punk walk away from them? Guess what? It's not about you. CM Punk owes you nothing. CM Punk shouldn't stick around someplace where he's not happy because it makes you happy. That's not how life works. That's not how the world works. It's just some people need to get over themselves, and it's quite sad that they can't. It's quite immature. It really is. CM Punk's gone. Don't envision him coming back. Just let it go. Be happy for him. He's finding something else that he likes to do. Hope he gets good at that. Now, didn't start at UFC 203, that's for sure. I haven't watched UFC pay-per-views in a really long time. I'm talking many, many years watching it regularly. And this year, the UFC has managed to lure me in to watching 2 pay-per-views this year. And ironically, both of them featured fighters who, at one point in time, either currently or in the past, were WWE Superstars. I tuned into UFC 200 to watch Brock Lesnar fight. And I tuned into UFC 203 to watch CM Punk step into the Octagon in his debut against Mickey Gall. Now, the fight itself, the build to the fight was exciting. The uncertainty surrounding CM Punk was exciting. This is a guy who's never had a professional MMA fight before in his entire life. He trained for about 2 years now since signing with the UFC. Had several setbacks due to injury or just lack of readiness. Finally, UFC 203 was the card set for him to finally put up or tap out, as it were. And Mickey Gall was the opponent. Now the fight's not exciting. By now, if you had any sort of curiosity as to CM Punk fighting in the Octagon, you will have found a way to have watched his tap out to Mickey Gall at UFC 203. Not a good fight. Not a competitive fight. If that was the only fight that you tuned in to watch UFC 203 for, I hate to say it, but you probably wasted your money. You don't waste your time because, well, most of the other fights weren't all that good. The main event was pretty solid and action-packed. But if you just paid to watch CM Punk and Mickey Gall, I mean, maybe you got your money's worth watching Mickey Gall because the guy's a hell of a fighter. Young up-and-comer. Talk to some people who are in the know when it comes to the UFC. They believe he's going to be a contender before long. And he's exciting to watch. He's got a lot of charisma, a lot of attitude. He's young, he's brash. He's the kind of guy you want to sort of build your company around. And he's ironic. I mean, Mickey Gall coming out to Tony Basil's Mickey, I thought was a great touch. Particularly because Dana White did not want him to come out to that song. And the fans were vocal about what a bullshit call that was. Dana White relented, and it wound up being just a sort of a great entrance. Because you'd never expect a MMA fighter to come out to, hey, Mickey, you're so fine. You're so fine, you blow my mind. Hey, Mickey. Hey, Mickey. Hey, Mickey, you're so fine. You're so fun, you blow my mind. Hey, Mickey. Hey, Mickey. Sorry. I just couldn't help myself. I get the bug. Now look, people are looking at this and saying, well, look what a failure this was. CM Punk just didn't belong. Dana White's even said, he probably should fight not in the UFC for his next fight, which is a realistic assessment. And everybody wants to look at the result, the fact that CM Punk got destroyed by Mickey Gall and had to tap out. And, you know, the victory, while not noteworthy in the fight because it wasn't competitive, so you had a guy who's going to be something who beat somebody who right now is nobody, and in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really look like much on paper when you stack it up. For Mickey Gall, you at least get some recognition of wiping out the name value of CM Punk, which is good for him. But for CM Punk, who a lot of people are knocking for sort of how the fight turned out, yeah, granted, he would have loved to win. I would have loved to see CM Punk win. I was rooting for him. I'm a CM Punk guy. I was rooting for him. I was hopeful that maybe this was the career change that he wanted to make and it would turn out all right for him. I wasn't rooting for him to fall on his face, to fail, like a lot of other people were. And now that he lost, people point to that as sort of like, good for him. That's karma for walking away from the WWE or something. See, I don't see it that way at all. I think CM Punk did an incredibly brave thing, which is walk away from a sure thing to chase the unknown, to chase a dream, to try and find out within himself if he could do this other thing. You know, I think we all have these issues. We all have something that we want to do, that we seek. We all have something out there that we would love to try and accomplish. But it's hard. It's hard to do those things. I got them. I mean, look, I'll be perfectly honest with you right now. I got script ideas in my head that I want to get down on the page. And every day I sort of procrastinate or I come up with some bullshit reason why I can't do it today. And part of it, I think, may be, if we're being candid here, a fear of failure to a point. Even though I know I can probably do this, but it's taking that first step towards doing it. It's terrifying. And we all have that. We all have these things that we would love to do. We'd love to set out and try and accomplish. And yet, we always find a reason not to do it. Why we can't. Because it's so much easier to just tell ourselves no. That's how we go through life. It's so much easier to say no. When somebody asks you to do something, or you want to go somewhere, or you want to see this or eat that, it's always easier to say no. No is safe. No is easy. No doesn't require any sort of risk or chance. No allows you to be right where you are, maintaining the status quo. But yes is a leap of faith. Yes takes guts. Yes is risky. Yes is chancy. Yes is uncertain. CM Punk said yes. Where so many of the rest of us say no. And you got to commend him on that. It's inspiring. You step back from the result of the fight, and it's a victory that he even got to step inside that octagon and compete. That was a real win. Everything else is window dressing. Sure, it would have been great for him to win the fight, but actually having the fight in and of itself is an achievement. In and of itself is commendable. For that, I salute CM Punk. Where this path will take him next, I do not know. I would love to see him try it again. Keep going at it. Test yourself. Because it makes me want to test myself. It should make you want to test yourself. And see if we can do these things that are within our reach. But that sometimes we're just too chicken shit to try. Man. Bet you didn't think we were going to get that deep on this week's show. Neither did I, but just started pouring out. So we ride with it. All right. So that's about all I got to say about CM Punk and UFC 203. That's kind of cathartic, I'd say. All right, I want to talk about Paige and the Paige situation. We talked about this on the show with Alberto Del Rio being released. Or not really. I mean, being released, but coming to terms with the WWE on his release. Sort of a mutual parting of the ways. It was good for everybody. Good for Alberto Del Rio to get the hell out of there. Good for the WWE to pretend this just didn't happen. It didn't work. So let's just pretend it didn't happen. And so what's been circulating with that is whether or not Paige, who is romantically involved with Alberto Del Rio, would also be trying to escape from the company, which may be a bit of a tougher spot for her because of the fact that she is still locked up contractually. Alberto Del Rio had sort of an opt-out clause in his contract that after about a year, he could see whether or not this is going where they want it to go, and he could stick around or he could leave. Paige she's tied up here. So you have sort of the complication of their relationship, all sorts of rumors flying about a number of things. But once again, a lot of speculation, a lot of conjecture. Nothing real solid And rumors that she would maybe be trying to get out, particularly after her failure of the wellness policy for the first time and the corresponding suspension that came with it. Good news is that Paige is going nowhere. Paige sent out a tweet earlier this week confirming that she's going to be in the WWE. And that she's going to be coming back healthy and wise, hopefully. And also took the time to address the wellness violation. So I'm going to read the tweet in its entirety, and then we can sort of go from there. Said, first, I'd like to thank all my fans for their love and support the last few weeks. Let me begin by saying that the rumors that I'm leaving the WWE are completely false. I certainly look forward to returning back to action at some point once my injury is treated and on a healthy return. Although I was disappointed by my suspension, I respect the WWE's wellness policy. However, let me be clear that I was not suspended for failing a drug test. It was merely due to a procedural issue. I took the test. I passed it. I arranged said test to happen after I wasn't at my home when Aegis contacted me. So I drove 200 miles to do it. Unfortunately, I didn't do it in time, according to Aegis. Once again, thank you for all the love and support. Now, this happens from time to time. I believe when Hornswoggle failed a wellness policy test, that was for a similar infraction. Hornswoggle at the time could not pee for the pee test for his sample to then be tested against banned substances in the wellness policy. And in not being able to provide a sample, that becomes a failed test. This, not taking the test in time, once you're notified that a test will be happening, would result in a failed test. Because the idea is that they don't want to give someone, and this is one of those situations where you're sort of guilty until proven innocent by your test, rather than innocent until proven guilty or doped or whatever by the wellness policy, is that it is assumed that if you can't pee and provide a sample or you're late, that the time that is ticking away is doing so at the benefit of allowing any consumed substances to deteriorate or filter out and through your system. Because a substance would only show up in your system for X amount of time, and by prolonging that, you may be diluting what is there or ultimately allowing it to pass through you, resulting in a positive test that wouldn't show, or a negative test rather, that wouldn't show the substance in your sample. I mean, these things happen and they suck and they're unfortunate. And Paige is taking it like a champ. She said, look, I didn't fail a drug test. This shit happened. It sucks, but I understand it. I respect it, and we're going to move on. I mean, that's about as good as you could say in that situation. Yeah, you could be pissed off as hell that you didn't actually fail a test, and this is going to be a mark on your permanent record. But I think she's handling it about as well as she can under the circumstances. Now, I'm psyched to hear that she's going to be returning. I did think that if she was going to be leaving, maybe now was just the right time. She's still young enough. She had time to sort of rebuild her career. Maybe come back one day down the line, having, I think, been damaged through a number of bad booking decisions over the years. But Paige being a part of the Raw dynamic, I think, is real key, with that being the show that she's on. Because right now you really have 3 females who are carrying the women's division. I mean, Dana Brooke, I still think is, although we'll talk about Dana Brooke in a triple threat match on Monday Night Raw a little bit later. Dana Brooke isn't anything to really write home about. But the top of the Raw women's division with Bayley and Sasha Banks and Charlotte is stellar. The problem is that you got 3, and they can't just keep fighting each other. Paige at least allows you some interchangeability. You know, and I think Nia Jax still has some ways to go, and they're building her, I think, the right way. But I don't think she's ready to get into that mix just yet. So they really need Paige's hands on deck. Because I think that fatal foursome right there, Bayley, Charlotte, Sasha Banks, and Paige, is a real solid, rock-solid foundation for the Raw women's division. You know, I don't have problems with the SmackDown women's division. I got problems with the way they're trying to establish it, but I mean, look, it'll get there, but I think Raw with those 4, like, right as the tent poles of it, that's solid. And I think also you have some movability with those characters over time. Obviously, with Bayley, Bayley's going to be your just pure white meat babyface forever. You don't want to shy away from that because she's so good at it. The fans love her. I think it's just it's a great gimmick, and she embraces it very well. Now with Charlotte and Sasha Banks and Paige, though, you have the ability to move those talents across the spectrum of babyface and heel. I wouldn't advise doing it too often. You don't want a big show situation on your hands where from one week to another you don't know what they are. And as a result, you confuse the audience. But at the same time, you have now the ability with those 4 women to tell several different stories, many different stories over the years, by sort of pivoting them at the right moment in the right time and keeping those feuds fresh. So I certainly look forward to Paige returning once her injury is treated and she is fully healthy. There is talk that she may be back next week on Monday Night Raw. The fingers crossed if that's going to be the case. I would love to see Paige back in action. And, you know, for anybody who wants to hate on Paige or Alberto Del Rio because they're together, once again, they found some happiness. More power to them. Wrestling is just wrestling. It's not life. So I look forward to Paige coming back to the ring and being a part of the Raw brand. All right, let's shift gears to TNA before we get into sort of Raw and SmackDown. I do want to talk about Delete or Decay, which is basically the sequel to the final deletion, which had Broken Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy in just a most bizarre sequence of events. You know, and something that really helped TNA creatively and to sort of turn a corner earlier this year because it got people talking about TNA and it got people watching TNA. And by doing Delete or Decay, I think it was, I mean, it's basically, it's a sequel. It's a sequel to the final deletion, and it's done for similar sequel reasons, which is that the first one worked really well, so let's try and cash in and do it again. And even in this case, I think you had people talking about it because they were wondering, well, where does this one go? Where does this go next? How do you top the other one, which was so bizarre and crazy and just wild and different and unlike anything we're seeing in wrestling right now? How do you top that? Now, I don't think that you could, and I don't think that they did. That said, I still walked away from watching this with sort of a WTF look on my face. Like, did this all just happen? And did I sit and watch the director's cut for 20 minutes out of my day? The answer is yes. So here you have the faction of Decay, so Rosemary and Abyss and Crazy Steve versus Broken Matt Hardy, as well as Brother Nero / Jeff Hardy, as well as Matt's wife Rebby Sky. Their kid involved, Maxwell, Senior Benjamin, of course, involved. And see, the thing about Deleter Decay is that I didn't find it to be as organically interesting as the final deletion. This very much feels like it knows what the first one was, and now as a result is sort of, it's like a wink wink nod nod of self-awareness. The first one's just truly bizarre. This one feels like it's forcing the bizarreness in order to make people talking about it. So, but look, I'm not going to say that I wasn't entertained by it, because I was. It's batshit crazy. I mean, Matt Hardy has a zoo at his compound where he believes that George Washington, that's right, George Washington, the first president of the United States of America, is a giraffe. Jeff Hardy fights a kangaroo who is supposed to be Smoking Joe Frazier. They actually have spot monkeys with a nod to the Young Bucks, or here the Bucks of Youth. There's like a slow motion fight in the in-ground swimming pool that has Jeff Hardy getting choked by a pool float. There's this Friday the 13th Jason coming out of the water and pulling the heroin out of the boat at the end. There's that moment. There's this odd mist swapping conclusion. Senior Benjamin is taken. I mean, the way that it all plays out, it feels, as much as we always say that wrestling is sort of like a soap opera, this actually makes it look like that. Deleter Decay it's not even a soap opera. The final deletion felt like a soap opera. It's really over the top, ridiculous. Deleter Decay was like a telenovela, which is a Spanish soap opera, which is further over the top than an English language soap opera. I mean, really out there. So I wasn't crazy about it. It felt more like the novelty had worn off. To use what I think is a pretty dead-on comparison, the final deletion is like watching Sharknado. It's kind of fresh, weird, different. There's a novelty to it. Deleter Decay is like Sharknado 2. So, like, yeah, you're still kind of getting the same thing, but it's not really the same. It'll never quite be as good as the original one, which is, you're just like, what the fuck is happening here? This is so crazy. Now that you're sort of in on it, it's not as good. Look, it's still very different. I did watch the director's cut for 20 minutes. So in that respect, they had my eyes. And they had my attention, and they kept it. So in that respect, I guess you could say it's a success. But in the grand scheme of things, nowhere near as entertaining as the final deletion. All right, so that's all the TNA talk for this week. And for the foreseeable future, unless they continue to trot things out like this. I mean, look, I'm not a regular TNA watcher. I try periodically, and I just go, I don't know. And look, it's gotten better. I will say it's gotten better. I'm not in a groove with TNA. That's the thing. You want to be a part of TNA wants you to be a part of it. They gotta get you in a groove. They gotta get you to remember on a regular basis when their program comes on, where it comes on, and make it compelling every week. It's gotten a lot better. I'll give it credit for that. It was in a real bad spot for a really long time, and I think they figured out a way to recover. And now it's watchable. I'm just not in a groove with it, like I am with sort of the WWE, like some others are with Lucha Underground, like I am when I binge with the Cruiserweight Classic or NXT. So I mean, I'm not writing off TNA. I'm not in a groove with them right now. If we get in sync, maybe. Who knows? Keep doing things that make people watch, though. They'll seek out your programming. So in that respect, Final Deletion, Delete or Decay is doing the job for them, which is attracting eyes to their product. All right, let's talk about Monday Night Raw, and then I can get into SmackDown as we sort of have the aftermath and the fallout from Backlash. I thought when I watched the Raw was all right. I thought there were some high points, definitely some other parts that I wasn't crazy about. But watching the Hulu version, I mean, I was able to fill in the blanks using the internet as far as what happened in the other stuff, and I didn't think it was anything all that noteworthy. But watching the Hulu version and having sort of a pared down, trim, tight 90 minutes of Raw, much more palatable than the slog of 3 hours that we get sometimes. So I thought the opening of Raw, even though I liked the fact that it had the women involved and sort of really trumping up the women's championship, what I did not like about it was basically the traditional Raw opening of just sticking a lot of people in the ring with mics and having this sort of long-winded back and forth. What I commended Raw on last week was a lot of backstage pre-tapes, a lot of earlier tonight interviews, a lot of things that were efficient on time. They were short, they were to the point, they were efficient on time. What I found this week was that all of that was wasted. So you had a long-winded women's opening segment that ran 15 minutes. You had the New Day and Gallows and Anderson later on in the ring. That just sort of went on. Not nearly as bad as last week, but it still went on. And as a result, you just have these really long-winded segments that just suck the life out of your audience. Because they're there for a long time, and these things just slow down the pace. Have something that's quick, to the point. You know, this is where the scripting becomes a problem, is because now they don't know how to deviate from everything that's been written. Back in the day when they used to have bullet points, it was just, you have 3 minutes to get this across, go. You have 3 minutes to get across the important points, build something up, and talent was able to sort of think on the fly, learn on the fly, build on the fly. Here they can't do that because they have to sort of go back and forth and everything's got to be explained, and it's like watching live theater but with awful pacing. So I mean, I like the fact that they gave the women the opening shot, but I thought that it just ran too long. It's very long-winded. A lot of people just saying nothing. Now, the result of that is we get a triple threat match between Sasha and Bayley and Dana Brooke for the right to face Charlotte at the Clash of Champions. One thing about this triple threat match, which I thought was fine, I thought Dana Brooke actually helped step up to the plate in this match. Bayley and Sasha, I had no problem with, at least on a technical level. I always like to watch them work. My bigger gripe with this match is that I talked about this last week about sort of Paige being injured and the top three at the head of the women's division, Bayley, Charlotte, and Sasha Banks, due to the injury of Paige, have been sort of forced into early action against one another. Now, the problem, I understand. They're between a rock and a hard place. They'd like to prolong this. They'd like to hold some of this off, but they feel like they can't because Paige is out. And what else do they have in the division following the draft split, which now sort of thinned out the women's roster? But I just find it really odd that they keep giving away the big money matches of this division. Last week we saw Bayley versus Charlotte. This week is a triple threat that has Sasha and Bayley in the same ring. And Bayley's only been around for like 3 weeks. It's just too early to see these matches. These are matches you want to see built up and made meaningful for down the line. Bayley Charlotte, Bayley Sasha. Sasha, all of them. So I'm not a fan of how this is coming together because, look, if you need to throw Bayley into action and you want to keep her with somebody, that's fine. There's give her some cannon fodder. Throw some jobbers her way to get her across, and maybe just have Charlotte keep throwing obstacles at her before she can get to her. But lining this up where we could have potentially been seeing even a triple threat match between Sasha and Bayley and Charlotte this soon, it feels incredibly rushed. It feels like there's just no long-term plan or vision, and I'm not a fan. So, I'm not crazy about it. In addition, when you come to these triple threats or fatal four-ways or fatal five-ways or six-pack challenges or whatever, can we also put a moratorium on the superplex powerbomb? Can we give that one a rest for a little bit? Because every one of these matches seems to trot that one out, and it's not special anymore. When it as they're lining up for it, I'm like, nah, superplex powerbomb. Like, I'm not, and it's not even that I'm jaded or cynical. It's just that when you do it all the time, it loses something, and it loses a little bit more every time you pull it out, and now we just don't care. Now we just don't give a shit. So maybe give that one a rest. Sami Zayn was on the highlight reel, where and this felt old school. I talked about this on the Backlash podcast with Maurice getting involved with the spray in Dolph Ziggler's face to interfere and give Miz the victory and retain the Intercontinental Championship. I talked about that on the Backlash podcast about how delightfully old school 80s manager it was. Sami Zayn on the highlight reel with Chris Jericho was also delightfully 80s. This felt like an old school talk show segment in the spirit of Piper's Pit or the Barber Shop or the Snake Pit or the Flower Shop. They're all shops. This felt like it because this was Chris Jericho talking to Sami Zayn about his jealousy of Kevin Owens, who is Chris Jericho's friend at this point in time. And Chris Jericho actually, after being insulted, attacking Sami Zayn in the face with his cell phone. Paul E. Dangerously would have been proud at that moment in time because that's not something you see anymore. You don't see a heel just sort of sneakily attack somebody with a legitimate foreign object. Foreign objects at this point have been just reduced to chairs or tables or maybe even the ring bell. You used to have dudes sticking things in their tights and taking them out as a foreign object. So to see a guy see Chris Jericho attack Sami Zayn with his phone, I thought it was classic. I was really entertained by it, and it's also nice that now they're moving Chris Jericho into something else, particularly now with Sami Zayn, who I think has been sort of in limbo with creative who didn't know what to do with him following the departure of a Kevin Owens feud. Look, they're going to go back to it. And I think one day we are going to have a WWE Universal Championship match headlining a pay-per-view between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, and when that day comes, oh, it'll be glorious. So we're going to come back to it, but it's nice to see them trying to do something else with Sami Zayn that doesn't necessarily involve direct interaction with Kevin Owens. We had a really excellent Seth Rollins encounter with Mick Foley. I think since Seth Rollins has come back and has been allowed to sort of step away from being the chicken shit heel and being sort of this passionate guy who feels he's been wronged, I think Seth Rollins has been great in his promos. I mean, look, it's only been like 2 weeks, but both of them have been fantastic. And as a result, I thought that was a pretty solid segment in continuing to sort of build any potential distrust between Mick Foley and Stephanie McMahon. And in addition, Seth Rollins, while he is now sort of being an edgy babyface, does have something that can resonate with the crowd, with the audience, with the WWE Universe. Because let's not forget, he was screwed by Triple H out of that Universal Championship. And he has a gripe. He has a legitimate gripe, a legitimate axe to grind with the game. And people can understand that. They can understand the guy who feels cheated, who feels ripped off, who feels looked past. And they're going to rally around Seth Rollins as a result. So, and Seth Rollins showing that passion, showing that fire, showing that he's mad, that he's angry, that he's pissed off, that just lends to the credibility of the character, a further justification for his actions. And it gives people something to sink their teeth into because they go, yeah, I get it. Makes sense. As opposed to the sort of the missteps they continue to have with Roman Reigns, which is that this guy's just too cool for school. He got cheated, man. Oh, so what? I'll just walk down to the ring like it didn't even happen. Just dirt off my shoulder. And I don't think people buy that. They want somebody who has the fire and the passion for it. Not somebody who's like, it's no big deal. I'm not digging that. I don't feel that. Cesaro and Sheamus continues to be an interesting story. I talked about this in the past, about how once they get to that 7th match and sort of the Cesaro comeback and the shift in momentum, I think it makes an interesting story going in as far as who the pressure is on going into sort of Game 7. I think there was a missed opportunity not to show the first Cesaro win, which happened last week in London off television. So I think that would have been a good place to start, which is like, get this guy on the board in front of people so they could see it and sort of rally around him. So I thought that was a wasted opportunity, but a pretty good match here to now set the score at 3-2 in favor of Sheamus. A New Day segment with Gallows and Anderson. The New Day basically burned last week's horrific, just cringeworthy Old Day segment. Even at a time, it's like 5 minutes and 37 seconds last week, which I found to be astounding because it felt like so much longer. The fact that it was calculated at only 5 minutes and 37 seconds, I think makes it worse because those 5 minutes and 37 seconds last week felt like a fucking eternity. So look, they're building towards a match at Clash of Champions, but if that's the case, then why here on Monday Night Raw are we going to get the New Day versus Gallows and Anderson again if we're going to have it in a couple weeks after we just had it at SummerSlam? I mean, I understand that your tag team division is also kind of thinned out. SmackDown is trying to reestablish some people with that tag tournament. But when it comes to Raw, I mean, right now it just feels like you have the same people fighting every week, which I don't think is that good. And, once again, they do the same thing with the New Day dropping a clean pinfall loss. So once again, now your champion loses on television in a non-title match, and the idea is, oh, look, but we made them beatable, so when they win at the pay-per-view, it'll be awesome. Except, no, it's not, because now your champion looks weak. You want a strong champion. Your champion should look vulnerable, but never beatable. I mean, you want to believe that they may be vulnerable, that maybe this is the chance, and you want to believe that they can be beatable, but you don't want to believe that they are beatable. And that's sort of the problem with these concrete decisions here in these non-title matches, is that you see them lose. That doesn't help. Putting them in a position where they're vulnerable and could lose, much different than actually seeing them lose. And I think that's a huge mistake that they continue to make. And that's why we've seen over time sort of the devaluation of these titles, is that you have people carrying them who just, they're no different than anybody else. Your champion should feel special. Like they're above everybody. That's why they're the champion. And yeah, on any given Sunday, so to speak, they could lose. Any match, any time. Somebody could get lucky. But you should want your champion to feel head and shoulders above everybody else, not ordinary like their challengers. Main event on the card was Kevin Owens versus Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins told not to interfere or there would be repercussions, warned by General Manager Mick Foley. The idea being that if Roman Reigns wins the contest, wins the match, then he would be involved in a triple threat match at Clash of Champions for the Universal Championship. So it would be Kevin Owens versus Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins. Rollins, of course, ignores Foley's warnings, interferes, causes a disqualification victory for Kevin Owens, which would put Roman Reigns out. However, Mick Foley, not going to have that, restarts the match, threatens consequences for Seth Rollins, and right away you think, oh God, look at this. They're going to hand Roman Reigns another thing, and the fans are going to be pissed, because this is the very thing that they don't like about him. Unfortunately, the swerve comes. Rusev, back from injury / real-life honeymoon with his wife, comes down to the ring and distracts Roman Reigns, allowing Kevin Owens to get the pin and removing Roman Reigns from the title conversation at Clash of Champions. In addition, Roman Reigns gets his comeuppance for being a dick to the newlyweds. Finishes the show being locked into the accolade. And I couldn't have been happier. And this isn't even as somebody who's a Roman Reigns hater. I think there's something there with Roman Reigns if you do it the right way. My deal is that Roman Reigns has been booked to be a douchebag. Insults this guy's wife, ruins their wedding, beats up on injured people. Guy's a bully. And as I said before, kind of a dick. So I actually felt good that Rusev, the guy who's been bashing America for months, came down with some degree of humanity and scored a notch of vengeance against Roman Reigns. Now, of course, we're going to see Roman Reigns and Rusev for that U.S. title at Clash of Champions, I'm sure. And I'll be rooting for Rusev because, hey, guy's just trying to defend the honor of his wife. But I thought at least this whole thing's been odd. I thought it was a nice touch having Rusev get involved and him sort of being the foil for Roman Reigns, even though I cheered for it. I was like, fuck Roman Reigns. And all the horrible things that he's done in recent weeks. So, I mean, not a bad show overall. Some high points, some things I could take issue with. For the time I managed to watch it, I was somewhat entertained. And there are some interesting things to build towards in a couple weeks at Clash of Champions. Oh, and in case I didn't mention, it was Sasha Banks who scored the victory in that triple threat women's match, so she will be taking on Charlotte at Clash of Champions, which in this case, as long as nobody gets potentially injured in a major fashion, may wind up stealing that show. All right, over on SmackDown, we had some interesting... I thought there were a couple of really interesting things. The one thing that I did take away, though, from SmackDown Live is once again sort of the disproportionate building of brands with the brand split. As we talked about leading into the draft and where we were going to go after that, the consensus was basically you gotta treat these equally. You can't have like an A brand and a B brand. You gotta have like A1 and A2 and let them run against each other. But put them on even footing, even ground. And what we have with SmackDown Live is, yeah, you got some top talent, okay? You got some top talent. So you got John Cena, you got AJ Styles, you got Dean Ambrose, okay? Randy Orton there on the card as well. Bray Wyatt, up and down. You mid-card, pretty solid to a degree. You got The Miz, Dolph Ziggler, real good solid mid-card. Even though I think there's more they're going to be doing with The Miz coming up. But then you look at the rest of it, and SmackDown Live is like, it's like the rehab show. Like, SmackDown Live is where you send people who got really fucked up on Raw, and now you're hoping that you could retool them on SmackDown. It's like what they would do often at times with NXT, where if somebody wasn't working on the main roster, sometimes they would send them back down to NXT to maybe rework on something new, reintroduce themselves to then potentially come back up. Remember, Emma, after the bubbles and the dancing, went back down to NXT, sort of brought Evil Emma to the front, and then that seemed to maybe have some place to go. When Tyson Kidd, for a while, was still, sort of that Heart Foundation dynamic earlier, when they sent him down to NXT to work as a solo heel, I thought that was when Tyson Kidd did some of his best work. I only wish they would have capitalized on that up in the main roster before he got hurt. But you look at SmackDown Live, and it's a rehab show. Kurt Hawkins is coming back in, and they're making him to be a big deal, like some sort of Chuck Norris fact guy. Jack Swagger is now officially a part of SmackDown. And the sad part is that when he came in and made a big deal about it, nobody gave a shit because of all the damage that had been done to Jack Swagger on Monday Night Raw over the months and years. Now, I think SmackDown is up to the challenge because that's what they had done in the past. They were able to revitalize people's careers, retool them in ways that make them meaningful, make them valuable, make them assets, before then they got swung back over to Raw and fucked up again. But either way, back in the day, SmackDown was able to do that. Can SmackDown do it again? I don't know. But it is weird that sort of like this is where they position all the rejects. Like SmackDown is the island of misfit toys. Which is fine and great and all, because I think there's a lot of underutilized talent. But perception-wise, I don't really know that it helps your brand to clearly be seen as like the island of castaways. A couple of things interesting to note, I thought, on SmackDown Live. Two things. Number one, three things actually, okay? And I'll make them quick, and then I'll send you on your way, okay? Three things. Number one, the Ziggler-Miz feud continues to run a little bit deeper, concurrently with the Miz and Daniel Bryan running a little bit deeper. So I like this sort of Miz with attitude, trying to prove that he's not soft, while definitely being heelish, sending his wife to get his belt for him, his wife to sort of stand between him and an opponent, or sometimes to even speak for him. I think that it's a great way to get tremendous heel heat on a guy who's already really solid at getting heel heat. But in addition, I thought that the Miz's work in the ring as of late has been better. And I like the Miz as a wrestler, but I think it's been better. It's a little bit fiercer, harder, a little bit more vicious, which I think sort of works against that that idea that he's soft or not wanting to take any contact. So I like the fact that they're working on those two feuds simultaneously, and we'll see how that winds up shaking out in the bigger picture, because I like all the people involved. I think they're really capable on the mic, and I think they'll be pleasantly surprising. And when all is said and done, if this allows both The Miz and Dolph Ziggler to perhaps move up, card mobility, move up into a main event position, then the SmackDown Live brand only benefits. So I think this could be like those great intercontinental feuds that we used to have, that were used to sort of earn street cred, build some respect for the talent in front of the fan base, and then have them move up as credible main eventers. So maybe we'll be seeing that there. There was a fatal 5-way number one contenders match for the women's championship. So the winner of the fatal 5-way would emerge as the number one contender to challenge newly crowned Becky Lynch as the SmackDown, the newly crowned first ever reigning SmackDown women's champion. Once again, I think I've spoken at length about these issues with the SmackDown women's division, which is there's too many women you're trying to make work right now, or establish or get over at the behest of others. You're gonna have to pick like 2 or 3 and work on them at a time, and then work on the other ones. But I don't think you could do it all at once, because I think it winds up being I think trying to do it all at once winds up being a disservice to all, because it's just too crowded. It's too crowded to take the time to really establish any of them individually. Good work in the Fatal 5-Way, like I said on the Backlash podcast. Different style than what we're getting in the women's division on Raw. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just different. So it is a bit of an adjustment. Alexa Bliss emerges as your new number one contender, and I think her and Becky Lynch could do fantastic things together. Alexa Bliss is really coming along as a heel. And we'll see where that goes. I don't think she'll be taking the strap off of Becky Lynch anytime soon, but I think in terms of story-wise, Alexa Bliss as sort of this cotton candy Harley Quinn heel against the Irish lash kicker, not kisser, that there could be something really valuable there for them to do something with. And the other thing is now sort of building on the main event sequence. So now John Cena is back. Obviously, Dean Ambrose lays claim to the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, having been sort of cheated out of it by AJ Styles at Backlash. This is the segment that opened the show, and then we got some interaction in the main event to close it, complete with a cameo by fan favorite James Ellsworth. But Styles comes out and gets to gloat about his new championship reign. And he's confronted by Cena, who now wants to tie Ric Flair's 16-time championship record. Pretty bold ambition by John Cena. Now, Dean Ambrose has something to say about that, obviously, because he should be getting a rematch at some point in time. So now Cena calls out Ambrose, stemming from Stone Cold's assessment of complacency on their very awkward podcast conversation. And then Dean Ambrose calls out John Cena for, hosting the Today Show and the ESPYs and American Grit, and hits John Cena with the insult that you knew, even though John Cena knew it was coming, just had to eat John Cena up inside, calling John Cena a lazy part-timer, which, if you're familiar with any of the criticism that John Cena laid against The Rock or a number of other former talents who would just sort of come in when they felt like it, but weren't giving their all to the company night in and night out all year round, that John Cena being called a lazy part-timer by anybody, that's a pretty heavy haymaker you're throwing right there. Ultimately, we're going to get a triple threat match at No Mercy, which will be in October. We'll have AJ Styles versus John Cena versus Dean Ambrose. I like the fact that Dean Ambrose is sort of fired up again. I think sort of the comedic champion thing wasn't working for him, but now that he's had a taste of the gold and he can sort of unleash some fire again, I like that Dean Ambrose. I like John Cena with some edge. I like John Cena talking about who's got balls and who doesn't, and not in like a kiddie jokey way. I always like serious John Cena. I like serious, passionate John Cena. I think that's really when John Cena is at his best, and I wish we got more of that. But I think this is a real interesting dynamic at the main event level for SmackDown Live, using those three guys who are all very different, all bring something different to the table, but when you put all three of them together in a triple threat match, woo, that one's going to burn the house down. Come no mercy. So let's keep an eye out how that one plays out. SmackDown Live closes with Dean Ambrose hitting dirty deeds on John Cena following a tag team victory for the both of them. And John Cena is going to answer that in the future. So lots of uncertainty as to how this thing's going to play out, but I'm very curious, very intrigued by what they're building here with Styles, Cena, and Ambrose. So we'll keep an eye on that. So overall, SmackDown I thought was all right. Some high points, though, mostly those three, I think. Or at least those two, Ziggler and Miz and Daniel Bryan, as well as Styles, Cena, and Ambrose. So let's keep an eye on those two major feuds that they got going on SmackDown Live, because I think that's going to be sort of the crux of their broadcast moving forward. That said, I'm going to get the go-home cue. I'm hearing it in my ear right now. All right, time to wrap this thing up. We're going to get the hell out of here, so I'm going to send your way. Let me get you some plugs, though, to make sure you know everything that you want to keep an eye on as I send you on your way. So make sure you follow us on social media. Hit us up on Twitter at the IWC Show. That's at the IWC Show. Follow us there. Wrestling news come to you. Anything that we find important that we want you to know about, we'll tweet it up there, as well as anytime a brand new episode gets released. That's sort of one of your notification systems. Twitter will let you know when a new episode has just dropped, so you can keep an eye on it for everywhere that you get the podcast from. So make sure you follow us there. Also follow us at Tis Infamous. That's TIS Infamous. That's for the mothership. This is Infamous, our home, sweet home. Always good content going up there, whether it's a podcast, a video, or some writing. So check it out, whether you like wrestling, movies, or a number of other things. Just keep an eye on thisisinfamous.com, and of course at TIsInfamous on Twitter. You can follow me as well at Infamous Kid. That's KIDD, 2 Ds at the end, at Infamous Kid, for all my random ramblings and musings, my stream of consciousness put into the written word in 140 characters or less, at Infamous Kid. Over on Facebook, 2 pages, facebook.com/TisInfamous, facebook.com/Billy the Kid. Always interesting discussion threads for you to participate and take part in. So like both those pages and get yourself involved there. You want to send me an email, theiwcshow@gmail.com. That's theiwcshow@gmail.com. Put your name and where you're from, because if you bring up something interesting, I want to make sure I credit it to the right person. So you got question, feedback, comment, whatever, send it to me. I'll read it personally, and if it's good enough, may make it onto the show. Podcast can be found wherever a podcast can be found. So you found us once, find us again all the time. Podcasts can be found on your preferred podcast distribution model. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Blueberry, SoundCloud. Just do a search for Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. Will come up. Make sure you subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode. They get delivered right to your mobile device every time a brand new one drops. And also, just do us a favor, rate the show and comment on the show. 5 stars if we're doing a 5-star job. Anything less, just keep it to yourself. Be generous and give us 5 stars anyway. Also comment and let us know what we're doing on the show. It only takes a couple of seconds, so jot down a few words. Let us know you like it, you don't like it, why or why not. And that helps other people be aware of the show and helps with some of our placement. So subscribe, rate, like, couple moments, and I'm greatly appreciative of it. You can find my work on a regular basis. Thisisinfamous.com. And that's about it for me to send you on your way. I've been your host, Billy Donnelly. This has been Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. Make sure you check out that Backlash analysis from earlier in the week if you missed out on that. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait till next week for me to talk more wrestling here on Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. So you have yourself a pleasant, immediate future. I'm out for now. Peace. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation has been a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.